The heavy fog swallowed the narrow streets of St. Calder's Reach. Victor adjusted his dark coat, shivering in the cold night air. Beside him, Lena held a flickering lantern that barely cut through the darkness. Daniel glanced around nervously and whispered that he hoped they had come to the right place. Victor said the old map had led them exactly to the abandoned manor on the hill. The iron gates of Blackwood Estate stood before them, rusted and crooked like broken teeth. Lena pushed one gate open, and it answered with a long and painful creak. Dead leaves cracked under their boots as they walked up the overgrown path. No one had lived in the manor for more than 100 years. Even so, a pale light flickered in the highest window of the tower. Daniel pointed upward with a trembling hand and asked if the others had seen it too. Lena tried to sound calm and said it was probably just the wind. Deep inside, however, she knew the wind could not light a candle. Victor stepped toward the giant wooden front door with careful determination. Before he could even touch it, the door slowly drifted inward on its own. A smell of wet earth and ancient wood rushed out from the darkness. They entered a vast hallway buried in dust and silence. The door slammed shut behind them with such force that Daniel nearly cried out. His flashlight slipped from his hand and rolled into a corner where the shadows swallowed it. Victor told them to stay close and keep moving no matter what they heard. Lena raised her lantern and revealed old portraits hanging along the walls. The painted faces were pale and solemn, and their eyes seemed strangely alive. Daniel avoided looking at them for too long because he felt watched. Somewhere above them, a faint whisper floated down through the air. It sounded like a child humming a lullaby that had been forgotten by time. Victor said they had to find the artifact quickly and leave before the house turned against them. The artifact, according to legend, contained the cursed memory of the town itself. They climbed the staircase, and every step groaned under their weight. With each floor they rose, the air became colder and heavier. Their breath turned white and drifted before their faces like little ghosts. At the top, a long corridor stretched ahead into thick blackness. The humming grew louder, leading them toward the last room on the left. Lena's lantern flickered wildly, as if an unseen hand were shaking the flame. Victor warned them not to look into any mirrors they might pass. Local stories claimed the mirrors in Blackwood Estate reflected the dead instead of the living. Daniel kept his eyes fixed on the floorboards and followed as closely as he could. At last, they reached a half-open door, leaking a strange blue glow into the corridor. Victor pushed it open and revealed a dusty library filled with ruined books. Torn pages covered the floor like fallen feathers. In the center of the room stood a small wooden table untouched by the decay around it. Resting on that table was a crimson amulet glowing from within. Lena whispered that they had finally found what they came for. Victor stepped forward and reached out his hand toward the amulet. The instant his fingers neared it, something icy seized his wrist. He gasped and pulled back, but there was no one beside him. The humming stopped at once, leaving a silence so deep it felt unnatural. Daniel called out into the room, but only his fear answered him. Then a dark shape peeled itself away from the ceiling corner. It stretched downward like smoke and slowly formed the outline of a tall, faceless figure. A voice filled their minds and told them they should never have entered the house. The voice sounded like stone being crushed beneath the earth. Victor ignored the terror rising in his chest and grabbed the amulet anyway. A freezing pain shot through his hand and up his arm, but he held on. The moment he touched the stone, the entire library began to shake violently. Shelves trembled, books tumbled, and the windows rattled in their frames. Victor shouted for the others to run. The faceless figure released a shriek so sharp that glass exploded around them. Lena and Daniel ran into the corridor without daring to turn around. Behind them, the floorboards cracked open and collapsed into a darkness with no visible end. They raced back toward the staircase as the house roared like a living beast. The portraits on the walls twisted, and their painted mouths opened in silent screams. Daniel reached the front door first and threw himself against it, but it would not move. He shouted that they were trapped inside. Lena screamed at Victor to use the amulet before it was too late. Victor pressed the glowing stone against the old iron lock. The metal hissed and burned red, and then the lock shattered apart. The door flew open, and the three of them stumbled out into the freezing night. They fell onto the wet grass, gasping for breath beneath the swallowing fog. Behind them, the manor suddenly stood quiet again, as though nothing had happened. The front door slowly drifted shut with calm and terrible patience. Victor lay on his back, clutching the amulet against his chest. After a few moments, he asked if the others were still alive. Lena nodded weakly, her face pale as moonlight. Daniel could not answer because he was still staring at the house in shock. Victor looked down at the crimson stone and said they had what they came for. Lena asked him in a trembling voice what price they had just paid for it. The amulet pulsed once in his hand like a living heart. The fog thickened around them until the road back to town almost disappeared. They all understood that St. Calder's Reach had guarded its secrets for a reason. By taking the amulet, they had awakened something ancient and hungry. None of them believed the nightmare was truly over. Slowly they rose and brushed the dirt from their coats with shaking hands. Lena lifted the lantern again, and its light seemed much smaller now. Together, they began walking back toward the sleeping town through the mist. Far behind them, in the highest tower window, the pale light flickered once more. A shadow stood there watching them vanish into the night. And deep in their hearts, they knew this was only the beginning.